Everybody, I'm Danny at Danny Girl Art, and today we're going to tangle this wintry Zendala. When you're done, you can post it or tag me at hashtag Danny Girl Art. I'd love to see what you come up with. So I'm going to be using a gray Zendala, and you can use either a black Micron 01 or PN. I am going to start with a 01. I also have a graphite pencil, a tortillon, a white charcoal pencil, and a jelly roll or a uni ball, and perhaps something thicker like an Identi pen to darken some areas in. First tangle that I'm going to start with is Stella. And Stella is typically done by Jana Rogers. It's typically done with these little orbs that are inked in. I'm going to be doing it with open orbs, but you choose what your preference is and what you feel comfortable with. So let's pick up our pens and start. Feel free to change things, vary things. It's completely up to you. Use different colors. You don't need to use a gray tile. You can use a white, a tan. You could do it on a square. It's your time right now to enjoy yourself. Okay, so I'm going to start with a orb on a smaller side. And I'm going to think of this as a clock, and I'm going to make an orb at 12 o'clock, 3, 6, and 9. I'm going to just rotate this so that you can see. And then in between each of these, I'm going to make an orb as well. And if this feels awkward on the next one I do, I'm going to show you a little trick. So I'm going to make V shapes. So I'm going to take an orb. I'm going to start. I'm going to take off and land on that middle orb. I'm going to go to the one orb to the right of that and make a mirror image. So coming from the opposite direction, I'm going to take off and land. I'm going to go to the next new set of 2 and repeat this. Taking off and landing, heading towards that center orb. And whenever you need to, pause the video, work at your own pace. Starting from each of those sets that we just did, I'm now going to take off and land, take off again from the orb that is here. And I'm going to come out kind of like a spade or a leaf shape, mirroring images again from both sides. So I'm working with those same 2 sets of orbs that I started. And if they're all the same, or if they're different, it's all okay. So now we have these sections that are in between, and we're going to be taking off and coming out and making another point, but it's going to, instead of going out, it's going to be concave. You can make them the same length. You can make them shorter. You can make them longer. It's up to you. So I'm going to, mine winds up being a little bit shorter. Do that on each one of these. And I'm going to choose the ones that were bellied out and just add a little bit of a flame shape inside for a little bit of detail. And maybe a few dots as well. So this is in every other section. It's the ones that are coming out, and it's like a little flame. So this is my first Stella. Feel free to go in and add any other details, but I'm going to be keeping this tile pretty simple today. The next tangle I'm going to do is vertigo, and this is a headquarters tangle. And I want you to take notice that these are rectangular pieces we're drawing, but I'm going to vary it a little bit and have some that are pointed, more needle shaped as well. So you might want to practice first this tangle and then go on to your good tile. So I'm going to start the centerpiece. I'm going to start from my Stella. And I'm going to curve around the outside of my Zentangle. And I'm going to aura this and come to a point like the centerpiece. And I'm going to start on my left side. Maybe some will go off of the Zentangle, making these thin lines with auras. Like little needles, maybe if you live in an area where you know what pine trees are. I kind of picture these like that. Doing the same thing on the other side. Making sure I hollow bar as I draw. So I'm not drawing on top of the Stella. I'm going to draw behind the Stella. Then I'm going to do a lot of hollow barring. I'm going to start from the stem at a different angle. You can go up or down, going behind these pieces that are there. And I try not to overthink it and let it happen naturally. Just looking at the spaces that are there and what area has a lot of empty space and needs some of these little lines. So I'm doing this on both sides, again, deciding maybe sometimes you'll do them more pointed, sometimes more rectangle, or perhaps you want them all to be the same. I like a little variation. I'm working pretty quick since you're able to pause the video and we're not doing this live together. But you work at whatever piece is most comfortable for you. It's not a race. This should be relaxing for you. All right, so maybe one more here. Okay, I'm going to do another Stella, and if you felt it was at all difficult to draw, what you could do is start with a circle in pencil, very light, because we want it to just fade away like a string. And maybe this one you want a little smaller, vary the size a little bit, and I'm going to have it going behind my vertigo. So I am going back to Stella now. And in the middle of this pencil orb or circle, I'm going to add a little orb. And now I have a place to land for the other orbs. So I can go in and do 12, 3, 6, and maybe part of 9. And then I can go in between. And it just kind of helps me have a gauge of where these should go. So just like before, I'll pick 2 orbs to start, taking off and landing in that middle orb, doing the mirror image, rotating my tile, doing the next new set of 2. So they're curving in, continuing around, not forgetting about the ones that would be behind. So this one, I'm not sure. I think my circle is back there. So I'm going to start with this and maybe work in reverse. So I think I'd have to have a little piece of a circle there. All right, so from those same sections, I'm taking off and coming up now. And then reversing in the other direction. I like making the size a little bit different. Play around with it, have fun. Make them really long and skinny. And I'll go in and add those little flame shapes again and a few little dots. And feel free to add any type of embellishment you would like. I'm keeping this fairly simple. Before I go too much further, I'm going to move on to and add some moonberries in. And I'm going to come down into this area and draw an orb. Inside that orb, I'm going to add a little starfish shape, either 4 or 5 little bumps, whatever your pen tells you to do. And I'm going to add an aura. I just love Moonberry. Those of you that have tangled with me know that is currently one of my favorites. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to add another Moonberry, like so. And perhaps debating. I'm going to add one here. It's always interesting when you teach because just because you have a sample, when you redo a tile, just like I always say to my students, no two are going to be the same. I'm not going to be making a complete replica of whatever I originally created either. So I sometimes from the sample I show, I have to make some adjustments. And that's fine. All right, so 2 moonberries there. I might go back and add some more. Time shall tell. I'm going to do one more Stella over here. This one's going to be a little bit smaller. Actually, nope, I'm going to do another vertigo first. Okay, so I'm going to have from this side now, a line coming around and with an aura. And just like before, I'll start to add those little sticks coming off. And again, decide, do you want them rectangle? Do you want them pointy? And for me, since I drew close to the edge, a lot of these will go right off of my tile. And before I do my overlapping, I'm going to add another Stella here. And again, you can draw that circle first if you want. If you are drawing that circle, just remember to do it in pencil. Closing off your pieces. And the reason I paused from the vertigo was just so to see, it came out different again than my sample, but I wanted to see if there was if it would change at all the overlapping. But I made it a little bit smaller than I had anticipated I would. So now I'm going to go in, tilting these new sets of branches or lines. And I just have a lot of them going up. But if you look at the step out, they do go down as well. For me, how I'm drawing on this round shape, it just feels more natural for me to do it this way. But you certainly can go this way as well and have some of them pointing down. And I'm going to pretend that there's some more coming from behind here. I just want to fill in the space now behind the moonberries a little bit. Nice. All right, same thing over here. I'm going to tuck in a moonberry starting with an orb. Maybe having a second one. And if you want to, you could go in as well and add some little orbs in between the vertigo. And I just like, since there's orbs in between here, just having maybe a few of these in just to balance the shapes out. And you could leave it like this. I'm used to adding darkness. So what I'm going to do is switch to my Micron PN, and I am going to add a little bit of weighting. So along the bottom of the center vertigo line, I'm going to, with my PN, just go over it and make it a little bit thicker. And maybe I'll do that on some of these, just one side of the branches. And I'm not worried about light source, so it doesn't have to make sense as far as how it would artistically usually. So you can see the difference between the two now. And going to do the same thing to this vertigo. Just choosing a side. Again, don't overthink it. Some of these pieces. And you might want to, if you have some little pieces, go in between and ink in some of these smaller pieces that are between Stella and Vertigo. I'm just trying to add a few little bits of darkness For me, I feel like this section right here could really use another, actually, I'm not going to. I was going to put another moonberry in, but I like how it's in sets of odd numbers, so I'm rethinking what I was going to say. I am going to ink in a little bit more, but before I do that, I am going to add a aura around my Stella, and you can use an O1 or PN. I have a PN in my hand that I'm using at the moment. And I'm going to aura, just creating this line, mimicking what's already there around my Stella, going around my vertigo. So it's going to be one continuous line that is going to come around everything. That's a big space in there, so we'll go back to that in a minute. And then this remaining open area, I'm going to aura around, I still have my PN, the edge. And this is going to all get inked in this area here. So I'm moving to my black Identity pen or maybe a graphic one. And I'm going to go in and ink this whole section in. I like to use short little lines. I feel like it fills in the space better than long lines. And if you have a pen that isn't quite as juicy as when you first opened it, and mine right now, actually, I can feel it's on its way out. I date when I opened them. Wow, this is from October 13th. I've definitely used other ones since then. This must have been one of my many that have been misplaced when I'm looking for one, and then I open another one because I know I just finished one from November this past week. All the tangling I do. Some people love inking in, some people do not enjoy it as quite as much. I am one of the people that enjoy it. I have to be honest, so there's not many things in Zentangle that I don't like. I do find some tangles to be more challenging than others. I put them aside and I revisit, and I love taking classes with all different instructors so that maybe somebody has a way that they'll explain something a little bit different, and you'll have that aha moment. This would be a really fun one on a white tile in color as well. I'll go back to those edges. Did I get it all? I think I did. All right, so now I have this little area in here, and I'm going to switch to my PN and make a smaller aura and ink that in. And then if I was working on my own, I would hold it up out in front of me and take a look at it to see where else I want to maybe do some inking in. So you can see that it will get darker when we start shading, but if you have little pieces you want to ink in next to the Moonberry and Stella, then please go ahead and do that. It can get a little confusing looking. I'm just going to leave it like that. I normally would not use an eraser. I don't love using erasers, but that's very dark, so I'm going to get rid of that. And excuse me, I'm going to start some shading. I'm going to pick up my graphite pencil. I like to use a 2B. And with the sections that are behind without the flame, I'm going to add graphite on this section of my Stella. And you might want to go piece by piece, or you can go in how I am and add your graphite first. And I'm not going to do, it's not going to be too much shading on this. I'll leave it very simple, this tile. Switching to my tortillon, I'm going to blend this out. Not covering all of that gray, but you can see how it's going to start to make the petals that are, or points that are in front start to pop out, and the sections that I'm doing right now recede. Over these moonberries, where are these petals, and over the vertigo, I'm going to add some graphite as well as where the moonberries are overlapping. So around this, I'll add, around these points, I will add graphite as well. And I'll start to tortillon that out. And you could shade in between each piece of the vertigo if you choose to. But what I am going to do is around this center section, add a graphite line. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Blend it out. I will add more on that in a little bit, but I'm going to go into this Stella first. You could add a little bit of graphite around the flame part as well if you have a large area. I'm going to hold off on doing that. Overlapping over the moonberry. And the reason I skipped and didn't continue to do the vertigo was I didn't know where Stella would overlap and make some gray. So I'm just going to choose some of the bigger pieces that are sticking out now. I'm not going to shade each individual piece, but it looks lovely when you do. So if you love, love, love shading, I do love shading, but I am not going to do that today because for this tile, I'm choosing not to. I'm just going to choose some areas to run graphite along the lines and blend it out. I'll do a few at a time, look and see, because you don't want this all to get super gray. You want to still have gray graphite gray. You still want to see some of the gray of the paper as well. So just keep all that in mind. Shading around my moonberries, coming around this other side of the vertigo, around this moonberry and Stella. Finding all those areas that are overlapped. Pausing and moving to my tortillon. Again, I am working at a much faster pace than what I would be teaching in a live class. So adjust, pause, go slow, adding on to some of those branches around the rest of my Stella. I'm gonna leave that part so that my aura still stays present. But I'll add, I just realized I forgot to add the little flames on this last one. I don't have to have them, but I quite like them. So I will go in and add those. The flame is not a part of the step out for Stella. It's just a little embellishment that we have added. So I'll go back to my Micron 01 and I'll add those little flames in. A series of dots. I have a really small Stella here, so not much there to work with. Okay, so again, like I said, I could keep going in, I could keep shading, but I am going to pause at, oh, I'm going to pause after I go around this side of the Stella. I missed that too. Definitely, I miss more if I'm not taking it and holding it out at arm's length. Okay, so from here, I'm going to move to my white charcoal. And I am going to, that's why I chose the gray. I'm going to add some white on these top sections. And I just use pressure. I don't particularly like to use a tortillon with white, but there is no reason you can't use one. If shading is a newer concept to you, you should use tortillon. Just go very soft with it, but I'm adding them to each of these petals, trying not to mush it in with the gray, just taking the pressure off my hands as I get to the graphite so that it just blends in naturally on its own. And sometimes if I do want to use a tortillon a little bit and I don't have a clean white one near me, I take the back end of my dirty tortillon and I just smooth a little bit. It's depending on the size of the area, of course. So I have some beautiful white there. I'm going to run a little bit of white down the center of my vertigo and perhaps some on the little clean areas of my Moonberry. Repeating these steps on the other Stellas. And you might also want to go in on a few of the skinny branches and add some white. You could use a jelly roll there too, because it's a really thin area. So you might want to use a jelly roll. Speaking of jelly rolls, I'm going to use mine in a moment. And I am going to go back into there, but before I do that, actually, I like the Signo better. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to run some auras, broken lines around the side of this black section, and choose how many you want depending on the space. I'm not going to have too many because my space is not that great. It is a smaller, less area. And then I'm going to add a few little X's or stars in, being careful not to smudge the jelly roll that's already there, and adding a few dots as well. You could do this in silver also, any color you want, add some color to it. I'm gonna let that dry for a minute. And while that dries, I'm going to go into a few of these with some white jelly roll as well. And please subscribe to my channel. I would love to hear from you and see your tiles. And I could definitely fuss with this some more. Just waiting for this to dry to show you the last step. I'm going to add a little bit of white over these little X's, and maybe just a little bit, very light inside here. And I'm just going to use the back of this because you can use your finger and just dab a little bit. I just want it to have like a little bit of a sparkly feeling. And go back and see where maybe you want to go in and darken some areas up for more contrast. Less is more to begin with, and you can always go back in and add. So there we have it. I hope you had fun and enjoyed. Don't forget to also sign your work, add your chop, and to sign and date the back of it as well. So I hope you had fun. I can't wait to see your tiles, and I'll see you back here soon.